I'm deeply grateful to the Lasker Foundation and to the Lasker jury for the huge honor of this award, which I'm proud to share with Steve Elledge. I admit, though, that it feels slightly wicked to be recognized for work that was a labor of love and has always been its own reward. John Tyndall, in the 19th century Irish physicist, in describing the mind of a scientist, wrote, quote, "He lives a life of the senses, using his hands, eyes, and ears in his experiments, but is constantly being carried beyond the margin of the senses. His mind must realize the subsensible world and possess a pictorial power. If the picture so formed be correct, the phenomenon he is investigating is accounted for. Imagination with him does not sever itself from the world of fact. This is the storehouse from which all its pictures are drawn." John Tyndall's pictorial power always played a major part in my scientific style. By 1961, after 10 years of investigating the mechanism of ultraviolet-induced UV-induced mutations in E. coli, I had reached a conclusion. My experiments had told me that a UV-induced mutation occurs when an unrepaired UV photoproduct, most likely a pyrimidine dimer, prompts a replication error during the first DNA replication following the UV exposure. I published these experiments and that conclusion, but not the vivid images that I had formed in my mind of just how that might happen. In the 1960s, only one of E. coli's DNA copying enzymes, the DNA polymerases, was known, the one we now call POL1. We also knew that this DNA polymerase was stopped cold by an unrepaired pyrimidine dimer in the DNA. That's where my imagination took over. I could almost see another DNA polymerase, less fastidious than POL1, knocking POL1 off the DNA and taking over as the copying enzyme, inserting any base at random with a high probability of error, opposite the non-coding ultraviolet photoproduct. 6 years later, when I found that a mutation in the LEX-A gene eliminated UV mutability, I proposed that this gene codes or controls just such a new error-prone DNA polymerase, responsible for UV mutagenesis by performing what we now call translesion synthesis. In the early 70s, Miroslav Radman and I pooled our separate observations and insights and recognized that UV damage induces a cluster of coordinately regulated DNA damage-inducible activities, soon known as the SOS response. In time, dozens of E. coli genes were identified as SOS-inducible, including the UMUC, UMUD, and REC-A genes, all essential for UV mutagenesis. It began to be possible to picture particular proteins carrying out translesion synthesis. Harrison Hatch Eccles, before his untimely death in 1983, was engaged in reconstructing SOS mutagenesis in vitro with purified proteins. Hatch's project has been carried on by Myron Goodman, Roger Woodgate, and co-workers at UCLA. They have identified the SOS-inducible error-prone DNA polymerase as POL5 and have shown that it is composed of a particular arrangement of the UMUC and UMUD proteins. 6 years ago, they showed that the mutasome, the active complex that performs SOS-induced translesion synthesis, is made up of POL5 plus REC-A protein plus ATP. By this time, I was enjoying not just a visual image of SOS mutagenesis. It was more like watching an animated video with multiple components shown in such beautiful molecular detail that it was, for me, like seeing a long-imagined dream come true. I'm glad that I lived to see it, and I'm so sorry that Hatch didn't. Thank you.